A former prosecutor and congressman makes the leap to a whole new vocation, fictional crime writing. How a background in law enforcement and government can translate into literary entertainment, and how a novel might better help us understand our system of law and order.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is All Things with Kim Strassel.
Welcome to All Things with Kim Strassel, and I am so excited this week to have as my guest Trey Gowdy, a former prosecutor and member of Congress from South Carolina, now a Fox News host, and as of today, the published author of a new thriller entitled The Color of Death. Trey, welcome and congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Kim. You are one of my favorite people in the world, so it is an honor to be on your podcast, and I just want every teacher I ever had to restart their hearts right now. She did not say Trey read a book. She said Trey wrote a book. So
Trey wrote a book. And by the way, while we're exchanging compliments, you are my hero. I have always wanted to write a novel. So you are giving me inspiration. But how does it actually feel to know it's out in print? People are buying it today.
very grateful that anybody would buy it. Grateful to Suzanne Scott and the folks at Fox for kind of encouraging me, pushing me to do it. Dana Perino, I mean, writing nonfiction, I did that 3 times, but this is a
Right.
whole different genre, a whole different, I mean, it's a leap. And I mean, the plus side is you don't get fact checked.
I
The
love that
downside
idea.
is you got to create all the inertia yourself. But exciting. It had been in my head, Kim, for probably a decade. Um, I'm not, pleased to say that I was writing it when the sermon would begin to kind of wane a little bit in church. I would let my mind run, and I said, you know what? If I ever wrote a fiction book, it would be kind of have this as the spine or the backbone. But I, like you, I never thought it would come to fruition, except Miss Scott and others pushed me.
Well, that's fantastic. And we need that kind of support around us sometimes to get these things done. The book, again, so everyone hears the title, is The Color of Death. It's co-written by yourself and Christopher Grayson, a longtime writer of mystery and actions and thrillers. Why the team up here? Tell us about that decision.
Well, he's a really accomplished fiction writer. And I'll give him a compliment. He's not a lawyer, so that's where I could help. Is he has written. Yeah, I think if Christopher were here, he would say that he fell into sort of the same trap that the media falls into, which is they write about criminal justice from the law enforcement perspective. Prosecutor is just a lawyer that comes in at the end. And that is not real life. That is not that's the miniseries and that's the movies, but it's not real life. Christopher had no idea that we went to crime scenes. He had no idea that we are like riding around in the car with the cops saying, yes, the chances of us getting prints off this gun are zero, but the chances 100% that the jury's going to ask why you didn't try. So it is a collaboration between cops and prosecutors and the victims or their families from day one.
Yeah, I really want to get into that. You just stole one of my
I'm
questions.
sorry.
Um, and I want to talk about the book to begin with. And then also try to weave in a bit of your experience of getting to this book and your knowledge and your background and the sort of specifics you bring to it. So just to give the plot so that people who are listening to this understand, and I'm cribbing a bit from the information provided on the book so as not to give anything away. And by the way, I haven't finished reading it, although I'm absolutely in love with the assistant district attorney, Colm Truesdale. And I hope this means there'll be more books about him. But the information about the book notes that A. Colm Truesdale, as he struggles to pick up the piece of his life following the death of his wife and daughter. After time off and with no desire to return to the courtroom, Truesdale is brought into the investigation of the murder of a young woman who ran a beauty salon outside of town. It's up to Colm to untangle the web of deception. Again, I don't want you to give anything away here, but tell us a little bit more about the book, its themes, and what you were aiming for.
Well, under the kind of the heading, no, there's no such thing as fiction. I actually prosecuted a case where a beautiful young mother was killed in her beauty salon. No other
Hmm.
part of the book mirrors what happened to Dana Satterfield. but that case went unsolved for a decade. So imagine the parents and her children waiting around for 10 years for there to be an arrest made. So I wanted to honor Dana and her parents and her children by having the victim be the same, but every other part of it, who actually winds up committing the killing, the suspects, the prosecutor, all of that is different. It had been in my head. Actually, too much was in my head. Kim, when I first wrote the first draft, the response was, "You that's like 3 books. You're acting you're acting like like you're in Congress and you get 1 minute and you have to say everything in that 1 minute. You don't have to say it all." So I had to kinda whittle down. I had to take some murders out and save them for later use, but the spine of this book is the murder of a young woman at her place of employment and all of the false leads and the false hope. The prosecutor, Kim, this is gonna sound moribund to you, but I believe it. There's a limit to how happy we can be in life. Like, if I were to ask you, "What's the happiest day of your life?" It might be, the birth of your children or the day you got married. But if I were to say construct the saddest day of your life, there's no bottom to that. I mean, we could come up with a fact pattern that just is crushing. So I wanted Calm to be as close to the bottom. I mean, he lost a child and his wife. So he'd given up on life. He just happened to be on call the night we have an on call prosecutor in every DA's office. You're on call if something happens. He was inadvertently placed on the call list, even though he was on grief leave, and he took the call and he wouldn't let go. I mean, I'm sure that he saw his dead spouse in the face of this young woman on the floor of a beauty salon. And that, for a lot of prosecutors, that is our motivation is, but for the grace of God go I. That could be my family member.
Talk a little bit about what prosecutors, district attorneys do because and you mentioned this earlier, but it's really interesting. I read a lot of crime fiction. And in the main, not always, but in the main, crime books are often, as you know, told from the perspective of cops and private investigators. You are doing this from the perspective of a district attorney. And yeah, we've all seen Law and Order, most of us have. And we do know that prosecutors play some role in this process. But mostly, as you noted, we think of them as the lawyers that come out at the very end. You also, at the beginning of the book, at least, you sort of suggest that there is this line between prosecutor and investigator. You actually write you shouldn't need a prosecutor if you have the right detective at a crime scene, not
Yes.
for a garden variety homicide. But tell us a little bit more. I mean, how involved are district attorneys in this entire process from beginning to end?
The good ones are extremely involved. I just talked to my successor, the man who took my place as the district attorney in my hometown. He is called on felony DUIs. That is his area of expertise. So every time there's a felony DUI, not just a homicide, not just a murder, felony DUIs, he is called. My chief of staff just became the top prosecutor in Greenville, South Carolina. Governor McMaster picked her. She was a violence against women and a domestic violence expert. They would call her the moment there was an arrest going to be made. So the way I look at life, who's the last person talking to the jury? The goal is not an arrest. The goal is a conviction. Who's the
Mhm.
last person talking to the jury? It's the prosecutor. So how early do you want that person involved? I mean, I have to explain everything that was done and not done. So if I have to explain why it wasn't done, I need to be there to make sure it is done. And you are reorienting. I mean, prosecutors and cops do not work for one another, but they are inextricably intertwined. And I had great success convincing my law enforcement officers the goal is not an arrest. That is not when it ends. The goal is a conviction, and that's a much tougher hill to climb. So let me get involved early on, and to their credit, they did.
You mentioned that at least this one episode, was drawn from a case that you did actually deal with. But I bet a lot of people are curious if you are a district attorney. I mean, how much of your day is actually filled with working on a homicide case or rape case or a, drug smuggling case, or how much of it is petty larcenies and non-felony DUIs or bail jumping, a little bit more of the quotidian stuff.
Well, when you first like, my daughter's a brand new public defender, so
Ah,
obviously you start
congratulations.
off she decided to try to get everybody out of jail that her father put in jail. So that that was her goal. So if you're brand new, then you're gonna be assigned property crimes, but I kinda reoriented people's thinking there. To me, domestic violence is a misdemeanor in South Carolina, but it's incredibly important.
Sure.
First offense domestic violence was a misdemeanor when I was the DA. But I put one of my very best prosecutors down in magistrate's court because those cases are really, really important. So are DUIs. So I don't have the same pecking order that other people do. I was nothing I was never an assistant district attorney. I was an assistant US attorney, but I
Mhm.
ran for DA. So all of my cases were I say that, Kim, I actually did a disturbing school case, which is a 90-day maximum sentence, not 90 years, 90 days because a principal asked me to do it myself. She said, "We want it done right." And I said, like, I got murders, I have rapes, I have kidnappings. You want me to come do a disturbing school? And she talked me into it. And so I did. I tried the case.
But it probably set an example too.
It set an example that you cannot go into I'm married to a school teacher. You cannot go into a school and berate and abuse teachers or administrators who cannot fight back.
Right.
And I will take you to trial. The first time it was tried, somebody else tried it. It was a hung jury. Then she came to me and said, "Will you retry it yourself?" And I did, and we got a guilty verdict. Look, I don't wanna separate the kid from the child. I mean, the problem was truancy. She would never bring the kid to school. So what better way I mean, you don't cure truancy by putting the child's mother in prison, but I wanted her to know you can't go into school and berate people.
Right.
So look, 4 days of my life for a case where she got probation, but I sent the message I wanted to send, which is do not do this.
So I love how you're talking about the moral interest you have in some of these cases. I mean, in terms of upholding basic principles and law and order. And you touched on this a little bit. And just a reminder, people who are listening, the book here is The Color of Death by Trey Gowdy. It is out today. A lot of people's perception, and I think it is partly driven by fiction and movie portrayals, is that the real humans in this process, the hard bitten but very feeling, emotionally tangled people in these cases are the police. And the perception of the prosecutors tends to be a lot colder. They are the lawyers in the suits who come in and make the kind of calculated judgments about the law, a bit removed from all the ugly investigation. But you note, and this was your comment about broadly about the book, is that the best prosecutors endure the fear, anger, pain, and loss of innocence of the victims they're fighting for. And I had never stopped to think about how emotionally involved a prosecutor might get in some of these cases. But is that something that routinely happens?
For the good prosecutors, yes. There's a reason that most litigators have other issues in life. I don't drink, and I've been married to the same woman for 36 years. But being a litigator is very hard on people. I just
Mm,
happen to enjoy it. But I guess I'm unusual in that regard. But most people who spend their lives trying to convince juries and fighting with defense attorneys and arguing with judges, it takes its toll. It manifests itself with me in a different way. It probably impacted my faith. I remember one week in particular, Kim, we had 3 children under the age of 11 who were murdered. Not killed in
wow.
a car accident, not a drowning in a swimming pool, which is equally horrific. They were murdered. And I just remember not being able to reconcile this belief in a loving God that singled out children for special treatment and 3 murdered children under the age of 11. So, yes, it takes a toll on you, which, I mean, truth be told, that's why I ran for Congress. I didn't want to be in the House. I wanted to get out of where I was because the best prosecutors, they really try to put themselves in the shoes of someone who has had their life shattered or taken or sexual assault. Imagine meeting I had a young woman who was raped over the course of 8 hours and became pregnant as a result of the rape, and I had to meet with her multiple times getting ready for trial. And you want more than anything in the world to do a good job for that woman, and you want her to feel like she is in power, she is in control at the end when he walks out in shackles, leg irons and shackles, never hurt anybody else again. There is no closure. That is a myth. But you want her to at least know this chapter of my life. Rape is a life sentence for the victim, but the criminal justice part of it, I won, and it is over. And the best prosecutors, there is no time off. I mean, you don't stop thinking about the case. I mean, I every gray hair I have is not from Congress. It is from trying to figure out what the defense attorney was gonna do and anticipate their argument so I could counter them in trial.
I love that we're talking about this, and just to widen this out a little bit, I mean, you're talking about these incredibly important jobs that prosecutors do on a day in and day out, and the multivaried nature of them. Not just being involved in the investigation, setting up a case, preparing for trial, dealing with the victims, being an emotional support for them. And I bring some of this up because prosecutors have suddenly become a much bigger feature in our daily political lives. I can remember a day when, to the extent the Department of Justice got headlines for anything beyond standard crimes like drug busts, they were usually headlines about actions against corporations. And it kind of tread very carefully when it came to political prosecutions. Now we're all about it at all levels of all branches of government, and to an extent that prosecutors are names in households. Everybody
Yes.
knows who Bob Mueller and Andrew Weissman is, and Jack Smith and Letitia James, down to Fonnie Willis, a district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia. Uh, is this a good thing for the profession?
No, I think, the left figured out pretty early on, if you really wanna control the criminal justice system, don't go be a public defender, go be the prosecutor. The prosecutors have far more power to impact people's reputations. I mean, think about all the tools any prosecutors, all the arrows in their quiver. I mean, reputation, freedom, money, your life, if you wanna seek the death penalty. And so people figured out that's where the power is. So, um, like George Soros, he wasn't picking public defenders, he was picking prosecutors, and you got this phrase which is oxymoronic, progressive prosecutor. I don't know what that means. I think it's Latin for defense attorney, but here's what I can tell you. When I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office for 6 years, I had no idea the political ideation of either of the people who sat in offices beside me. It was only when I ran for district attorney and they donated to my campaign. Of course, I had to leave under the Hatch Act, so I had left. They sent me checks and they both wrote, "You are the first Republican that I have ever donated to." That is when I knew their politics. It never came up. I don't know the cops' politics. I never had a conversation with an FBI agent about politics. I blame Comey a lot for that. I mean, he famously told me, actually, in a congressional hearing, "The FBI doesn't give a hoot about politics." I mean, how poorly did that quote age, Kim? You of all people know
Oh, I know.
you
I
did
know.
more work on that than any other reporter I can think of, by far.
By the way, that guy's far more a politician than he ever was a cop or law enforcement.
But to write a book about higher loyalty and to be a moral crusader and then to now learn what we are learning. So really it kind of goes back to the ring of Gyges. Who are you when you have the power? Who are you when you're invisible? And good people need to become prosecutors. Humble people, Kim. I like to tell people I actually cleared more people than any criminal defense attorney ever will. That's the other untold story about prosecutors is they actually clear innocent people. The good ones do.
That was my next question is, I don't know if you get into this at all in the book. Your character here is the hero. His cause is just and sympathetic, and he is fighting for true victims. But of course, the other side of the prosecutorial craft, and it never gets discussed, is that prosecutors both have a duty to pursue criminals for obvious crimes, but they also have a duty to clear the innocent. And that
Yes.
means to stand back at times and not just be interested in getting another scalp to put on the wall, but if the evidence is dubious, to stand down and make it clear that this person is not. Because if you don't and you go after that person anyway, the victims are in fact the targets, especially because prosecutors have such extraordinary power in this realm. Is that something that comes up at all in your book, that you explore? Is a prosecutor's duty on that front?
Yes, the prosecutor himself drops charges where he is the victim because it was the right thing to do. I There's this quote, I think it came from John Adams when he represented the British soldiers, which a lot of people forget. You can actually take an unpopular political position and go on to be president. John Adams represented British soldiers charged with shooting Americans, and his quote in closing argument was, "May justice be done though the heavens fall." I've as vividly as I remember the worst death penalty case, I remember seeing this man on a videotape selling what appeared to be crack cocaine, and his lawyer came to me and said, "Look, it's not him. It's a case of mistaken identity." And I looked and I said, "It looks a lot like him. I will have no trouble convincing a jury that's him. But go tell me who it is. Go find out." About a month later, he came back and said, "This is who that is." I brought that person in and he admitted, "Yeah, that's me on video." I could have easily convicted the wrong person. They looked a lot alike, Kim, a lot alike, particularly with a camera hidden in a fake broken arm, which is what the cops were using back then and kind of pointing it at, looked a lot alike, but it was the wrong person. I should take pride in clearing someone who was falsely accused. I should take as much pride in that. We are ministers of justice. Our job is not to get convictions.
I want to ask you just too about coming to the writing of this book as we round this out. You've now had a number of careers. You were prosecutor. You ended up bringing, in my mind, those prosecutorial skills to Congress. I was there and watched you in action during the Russia collusion hoax, Benghazi, other investigations. Now you're bringing that experience to fiction. I find this kind of interesting. When you were in Congress, you stayed there only 4 terms, and that might seem like a lot to you. To me, it's 8 years in Congress, but for many people, that's just nothing because they go there for lifetime. And I find it fascinating that you have done these different things in the world. A lot of founders of this country and actually envision the idea of the legislature as a home for the citizen legislator, the idea that people went out, grew up, found a productive career, had real skills, which they then at a certain point decided to take a break and devote those skills in the service of their country in a civic capacity as a member of Congress, and then to leave again and go
Yes.
back out. And you did that. You were not a forever politician. Was that a conscious choice when you left to not be a forever politician? And in much in the same way as now you've decided to make a new thing to go on and go into fiction writing.
Kim, I would say that I needed an honorable exit from the courtroom. I didn't want to admit that it had had an impact on my faith. I didn't want to publicly admit that I can't keep seeing depravity and evil. So I was looking for an honorable way out of the courtroom, and the options are run for AG. But a friend of mine wanted to run, named Alan Wilson, who is the AG, and also running for governor. And then some people taught me to run for Congress. But the truth is, I was never running to be in the House. I was running to get out of the courthouse. And if I had to do it all over again, I don't know if I would. I didn't enjoy. I love the friendships I made.
In Congress?
Yes, Tim Scott will preach my funeral. John Lee
Okay.
Ratcliffe will be a pallbearer. Kevin McCarthy will be a pallbearer, assuming they're not the ones that kill me. And even then, I'd probably still have them. But in terms of productivity, I want to be remembered as a prosecutor. That is the job I loved the most. To do it the right way, it extracts a toll that is extremely high on every part of your being.
It certainly comes out in this book. Is there going to be a sequel? Last question. Do I get to spend time with Calm again?
I hope that you see calm again. I hope Belle, my wife, wanted light to be in the book. She is a very happy, optimistic, hopeful person. She is like a Christ-like figure in this book, and there's a character named Belle. She winds up going to law school. If Miss Suzanne Scott says, "Write another book," I already have it in my head. If she says, "Go back to working on Sunday nights," uh, you probably won't get a chance to see how she does in law school, but I would love to continue this journey. As I said, I had all these crimes in my head, and they said, Winnow it down, Trey. It's too much." So I hope I get to write all 3 iterations of what are in my mind right now.
This is Belle the waitress, right?
Belle the waitress goes to
You're
law
giving it
school.
away. Look, now you're giving it away. All right, we're going to stop there before you like spoil the rest of the book for me. Once again, the book is The Color of Death, written by Trey Gowdy and Christopher Grayson. Excellent stuff. Trey, thank you again for joining us this week.
Thank you. One of my favorite people, Kim. You know that. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We also want to thank our listeners. If you like the show, please hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to write to us with your own review of Trey's book or suggestions of my next read in fantastic crime fiction, you can do that at atkim@wsj.com.